I'd like to open the meeting at 7:03. We have no transmitting of the Treasury warrants. We don't have minutes this evening. The only appointment we have is the Town Manager, Jeff Hull, Town Manager, presentation of the Town Manager's FY 2015 budget. And Jeff, you're on.
Thank you and good evening. First of all, to Chairman Michael McCoy and the Board of Selectmen, Chairman John Doherty and the Finance Committee, Chairman Peggy Kane and the School Committee, and others in the audience. I see some department heads and others. Greetings. It gives me a great pleasure this evening to present to you the 2015 budget. It's intended to preserve the fundamental tenets of sound municipal management by providing departments with the resources they need to operate effectively, investing in employees, infrastructure, facilities, and equipment to meet our current and future needs, and setting aside funds to meet future obligations and maintaining reasonable financial reserves. What I'd like to do this evening is, first of all, talk to you about the goals which, as many of you know, I outlined last year in my presentation. I'll also talk to you about the projected revenues for the town in the coming fiscal year, outline the expenditures and focus on particular categories where there are circumstances that warrant additional discussion, cover briefly the warrant articles that are proposed, highlight some of the capital, and then do a wrap-up. So first of all, in terms of goals, last year, you may recall, I identified several goals which included the preservation, to provide the resources and tools needed for 21st century education, improve energy efficiency in buildings and vehicles, utilize technology to improve on service delivery, maintain a multi-year capital improvement program, and develop plans and policies to reduce risk and improve efficiencies. This is a work in progress. As you know, goals are something that are not achieved in 1 year. In many cases, it takes multiple years. And I really view these goals as my guide for the next several years. There will certainly be objectives that I will present from year to year that will be intended to move us closer to those goals. And I'm proud to say that after about 7 months into this fiscal year now, that we have achieved some of the goals, and some of them we're making great progress on. So at this point, certainly one of the goals that I'm proud to say we have accomplished this evening is the preparation of a capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan. Each of the members of the board has a copy, as well as the Finance Committee will have a copy. That was a major effort on a number of people's parts, and that will be an ongoing effort that I'll talk more about later. With respect to revenues, what you see before you is essentially the revenue sources that come to the town, and as it's pretty obvious to see, the vast majority of our revenue comes from the local property tax. In fiscal 15, it'll be approximately $68.7 million. Then on, to a lesser degree, local receipts, which include a motor vehicle excise, building fees, the meals tax. And then on the other side, you see the local aid. Unfortunately, local aid has been a diminishing portion of the revenue stream over the last few years. As late as fiscal year 2011, we're receiving about 18.5% of our total revenue from the local aid. Unfortunately, at this point, it's down to about 14.2%. This graph shows in the red, the increase in the property tax as a percentage of the overall revenue. The local receipts, which has gone up to some degree, and certainly one of the efforts that has led to the increase was the meals tax that was passed a couple of years ago. In the blue, you'll see that the state aid or local aid is really flat and actually diminishing slightly. This year, based upon the governor's proposed budget, he is suggesting increasing the aid for students by about $25 a student. He's looking to level fund the general government aid portion, which has been has been level. Actually, 2008 it was $400 million more than he is proposing this year in the aggregate. So that number has greatly diminished. And I would just point out that what appears to be a continuing trend here of decreases in local aid is really, in my estimation, undermining one of the tenets of the whole Proposition 2.5 legislation that was passed back in 1980, which was to take some of the burden off of the local property tax and try to diversify our revenue stream. This slide here shows how the local aid is, again, continuing to drop off and is almost as much as a percentage, anyways, of our local revenue as the local receipts are. So it remains to be seen what will happen. I know the Speaker of the House indicated at our recent Mass Municipal Conference that he is looking to increase the general government aid. Whether the legislature has the wherewithal or the willingness to do that remains to be seen. In terms of local receipts, while we're on that topic, I would just note that one of the categories of local receipts, which is investment income, we are estimating to decrease by about $115,000. That decrease is in large measure due to the fact that we are continuing to draw down on the money for the construction of the high school. Obviously, as we approach the completion of the high school and the expenditures run out for that, the interest that was accrued on that will tail off. Also, we're expecting the meals tax, which has been running at about $267,000 or thereabouts. We expect it to be around 270 this year, about level. And then the other category that it will be a decrease slightly is the Medicare drug subsidy program, which we've been receiving for, I believe, since 2006. It's money that comes back to us as a result of employees who are or retirees who are receiving health insurance through the town. It's a subsidy the federal government has been providing, and there's some question as to whether they're going to sustain that program. Next, you will see another graphic here. This is, again, with regard to revenue, and it shows at the very top, this is the distribution of the tax burden. And if you recall, when the assessor came before the board back in November and the board approved the tax classification process, it was noted that the residential values had increased, which is good if you're a homeowner. I suppose it's bad if you're a homeowner paying taxes, which unfortunately everybody who is a homeowner is. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. So the average property, residential property in Wilmington went up to $358,000. The commercial property also increased in value to a marginal degree, but the industrial sector decreased in value. And as a result of this decrease, what we're seeing is the burden, the tax burden, being shifted back to the residential. So even though the Board of Selectmen did exercise their ability to shift a portion of the tax burden off the residential taxpayer to the maximum, in fact, because of the decrease in industrial values, where in last year's burden, it was essentially 55% residential, and the balance was commercial, industrial, and personal property. The residential piece has ticked up to about 57% of the tax burden. So that's what this is intended to show. Next is just a point that I think is noteworthy here, and that is that the budget that I'm presenting this evening is an overall increase of 2.89%. That compares with last year's overall budget increase of 3.88% and the previous year of 8.13%, which I would tell you is certainly a challenge given some of the cost increases that we have to deal with between fuel, between the employee increases in cost of living, negotiated increases. On the town government side, 15 of the 33 operating accounts or departments had increases of 2% or less. So we really made an effort, recognizing what I believe was kind of a outcome of the reclassification process, where people were really, in spite of the fact that I think there was obviously clear and significant support for the high school, I think people were feeling it a bit, and so we're cognizant of that and attempting to minimize the increase. Next, you have the expenditure breakdown, and again, this reflects how your money is spent. So essentially, 41 cents on a dollar is spent for education, and certainly education is really the paramount reason why we're in the business of municipal government here, and that is to improve the education of our students and make them, assist them to be more productive citizens going forward. That 41% is both a combination of the Wilmington school system as well as the Shawshene Tech. Then next in the lineup there is the shared cost and statutory expenses. This is a combination of insurance and debt. Statutory charges include the MWRA assessment, the MAPC assessment, retirement, all of those various categories combined to form the next major category. And then we also have a public safety, police, fire, and dispatch, the general government, which are the departments, my office, clerk's office, assessors, the conservation planning, all of those offices. Public buildings is about 5%. Public works is 6%, and then human resources, which are the library, veterans services, and the senior center. And then finally, over on the far side, you'll see the warrant articles in the Capitol. This slide presents an overview of the expenses, overall expenses in relative terms. You'll see, again, as previously noted, that education is the major expenditure of town government. In the next category, you have the shared expenses that I talked about, which did take a rather steep increase this past year. I think some of that was a combination of retirement assessment as well as the cost for the tax overlay, assessment overlay that we have to put on for tax purposes in terms of an amount that's set aside to reimburse people in the event that they pursue an abatement. So there was an increase there, but after that, it's been certainly a modest increase. And on the lower end, you see that town government has sustained a relatively modest increase in costs. Next is the school. As everyone knows, we're in the, I would say, I guess coming around the third turn, if you will, of completing the high school, $82.6 million, 44.6 of which will be paid by the town, 192,000 square feet, a little bit more. And we're very anxious to see the completion of this project, which is slated for February 2015. At least that's the time where the students will be expecting to move in, and then the final work will be wrapped up in the fall of 2015. Beyond the new school, there'll be a significant transition going on as Joanne Benton, our school superintendent, will be retiring at the end of this academic year, and so we'll have a new superintendent on board. One of the things that Joanne and her staff have done in terms of preparing for this budget is to, again, focus on technology. There's $260,000 primarily for capital related to computer upgrades. And as she has noted, she is also working really under some serious constraints in terms of the growth of unfunded mandates. In part, the Affordable Care Act puts pressures on her budget, and to her credit and her staff's credit, they've been able to hold their increase to 3.5% for this upcoming fiscal year. In addition, as a result of the new high school that's slated to go online, I'm recommending the hiring of a one full-time custodian to assist with the efforts there. The facility is about 192,000 square feet, which is approximately 40,000 square feet more than the current building. So there is a greater amount of space to be maintained. Certainly, this is a building that we want to maintain in prime condition for the long haul. I would say also that, as much as we have focused over the last few years here on this new state-of-the-art school, in the end, this school is going to create a safe environment, an environment, a real positive learning environment for our students. In the end, it's really going to come down to the teachers and the administration and support staff to add that human touch that makes education what we expect it to be. So, we're building a great facility here, but it still comes down to the personnel that we have working in the facility. Next, we're looking in the fire department at some significant turnover. This started about 15 months ago, and we expect to continue for the next couple of years. We're seeing a wave of retirements. Many of these individuals started with the town back in the 70s and early 80s and are now retiring. As of July 1st of last year, 5 of our 40 positions were unfilled, and we actually decided to take a different approach. As many of you know, the fire is a civil service department, so there's a certain process that is required to replace fire personnel, and it is certainly, in my estimation, can be very time-consuming and takes a tremendous amount of effort. One of the changes we made this past summer was to require that when we pick from a civil service list, that we're picking EMT-trained individuals. Prior to that, individuals may not necessarily have been EMT-trained, and so that added to the process of getting those people up and running, so to speak. So having them EMT trained allows us to at least put them in some measure of manning, so to speak, so they're able to respond to medical emergencies. And as a result of that effort, it did take a little bit longer to get that first crop of new firefighters, if you will. But I think in the end, it'll pay dividends. The other measure that we're also taking with the fire personnel is to create a permanent intermittent list, which is essentially a list of individuals who have expressed interest in serving in the fire service, have been pre-screened, and it's a farm system, if you will, so that when a vacancy opens up, we're able to draw from that list rather than having to go the conventional route, which is, again, very time-consuming. The net effect of all of this, though, is that at the moment, the command staff that will ultimately cycle through here, the 75% of the command staff is going to have less than 2 years of service in those positions, and on the firefighter side, there's going to be 25% of our firefighter group with 5 years or less of service. So it's a very unique circumstance, and one that is going to require a level of investment and training on our part. One of the things that has been becoming more of a challenge over the years is our ability to train personnel on the job. Historically, a lot of the training that took place in the firehouse, but with the increase in responses to medical emergencies and to some degree fires, it makes it more and more difficult. Just by way of statistics, we had back in 2011, 1,800, a little over 1,800 runs. Now it's, as of 2013, over 2,000 runs. So the challenge there is you have this in-house training, and then they're constantly being required to respond, which obviously is their mandate. What we're proposing to do in this budget is to increase overtime for training by $40,000. So that will allow us to have officers come in off their regular shift and get the training and the focused time that they need to get up to speed. And this would be both for the privates as well as the command staff. In addition, one of the issues that we have seen over the last couple of years is the overtime cost. And as you can imagine, if we're down in terms of staff, we have fewer people filling the spots. Ultimately, we man to 9 per shift, and so we have to call in people to replace. To the credit of the fire personnel, both the privates as well as the command staff, we have not had a lot of work injuries, which can really create additional havoc on a department because, again, you have to replace those individuals. We have had some, unfortunately, some non-work related medical issues that have drawn people out. The other piece that we're experiencing is that as more of our hires come in with military experience and they have military commitments remaining, they're called to active duty for several months at a time. Obviously, that's an obligation that we support and feel that they need to honor. But again, it requires that we backfill and causes us issues with overtime. The net effect of this has been that the last couple of years, our overtime has been higher than budgeted. What we have been able to do historically is work with the Finance Committee and obtain funding through the reserve account, and also look at other accounts within municipal government to draw from. This year, we're anticipating a similar situation, and we'll look to deal with it within the budget. But my proposal for fiscal 15 is to establish a more realistic overtime budget. So I'm proposing that the overtime be increased from $550,000, which is the current amount, to $800,000. So it's a significant jump, but in the end, it's my expectation that is a more realistic number. Next, Public Works. You may recall that up until this past November, we had the Public Works Department and the Water Department, which were separate in some respect, although they worked together quite well. Really the final phase of the process was merging those two groups. Don Onesite, the former Public Works Superintendent, retired in November, and I looked at that as an opportunity to make the final step and fully integrate the Water and Sewer Department within the Public Works Department. Mike Woods was hired as the Public Works Director, and we reorganized the administrative staff a bit there. But the end result is that when you remove the costs associated with water, which is paid for through the water rates, their budget this year is only going up about 1%, which is, I think, a real positive for us. There's certainly some economies, as I talked about when this was discussed with the Selectmen back in the fall. Veteran Services. This is another category of expense that, a category of service that has seen some increase. Certainly, I would expect that no one debates the fact that we have a responsibility to our veterans who have served us in very trying and, in often cases, dangerous circumstances. What we've seen of late is that there's been an increase in the requirement for veterans' benefits. Again, last year we were able to deal with that through making transfers or requesting transfers out of the reserve and through other accounts. This year appears to be similar in the cost projection. What we're seeing, according to the veterans agent, is really the demand for services coming in large measure from veterans of the Korean and Vietnam War, certainly some from the more recent engagements, and I would expect that to continue for some time. And so in order to address this, I'm proposing that we increase the veterans' benefits by $90,000 from $310,000, which is the current budget, up to $400,000. In addition, as Mr. Somaglia can attest, the complexity of benefits that are required and the time is in some cases overwhelming. I think it was last Friday that I went by. I left here at 10:30, finally wrapping up my work here on the budget along with Kendra, and I drove by the West School and I see the lights on, and sure enough, I called Lou, and he was in the office trying to play catch up. Clearly, there's a tremendous demand on his time in terms of providing the services that these folks are entitled to. Right now, we have the veterans agent full-time and a 15-hour-a-week part-time clerk, and what I'm proposing in this budget is to increase the clerical time by 10 hours a week. Insurance is another category that I know many of you have heard me talk about in the past as being a real budget buster. This is one that we will deal with, I suspect, for the long haul. It's not an issue that's unique to Wilmington or even to municipalities. Private sector is also dealing with it. We've been able to make some inroads here. In 2013, we met with the employee groups, and to their credit, they understood where we were coming from, that there was a problem. We took some measures to try to essentially reduce the increase, which is about as good as it gets. And now we're starting to see the benefits of that come into play. we're projecting a 3% increase in health insurance versus the increases that we've seen historically, which have been in the range of 9 to 9.5%. So that's a good piece of news. The July 4th, as everyone knows, this is probably one of the most core elements of Wilmington. The town has been fortunate in recent years to be recognized by a number of different organizations and publications, and it's interesting to note that one of the elements that they cite in their recognition of Wilmington is our July 4th event. It's a family-oriented event. Unfortunately, as we knew going in with the high school construction, given the lay of the project, that we weren't going to be able to conduct the fireworks and the carnival, at least in the short term, as had been the practice in the past. I've had a number of conversations with Scott Grant, the chair of the July 4th committee. We've had meetings both with Scott and members of my staff to try to identify options. We haven't been able to come up with an option there, but I'm still committed to putting together some kind of a program. It's going to be, in my estimation, smaller scale. We won't have the fireworks and the carnival, but I still think we can put together a program that's family-oriented, that has activities for the kids, that invites the local fraternal groups to come out and have their suppers and their breakfasts, that is perhaps most likely shorter in duration, but still an opportunity for people to get together. One of the things that's always struck me about the Wilmington July 4th events, it's really a homecoming. People have an opportunity to get together, haven't seen each other in a while. And I'd like to see if we can't continue that tradition in some manner. So towards that end, I'm looking to request through a warrant article that the town raise and appropriate $15,000 to supplement and support an effort to provide a program for July 4th. I've talked to a couple of people about some ideas, and we'll be reaching out to others to see if we can put together a program for July 4th. This represents the capital improvement plan that has been submitted. The total, including water, which isn't reflected here, but for fiscal 15, including water-related capital, we're talking $3,876,645. The $2,366,645 that you see is through the tax levy, non-water related. And what you're seeing here is each of the 5 years that is projected out. This document is not a hard and fast document. My expectation is that it'll be modified from year to year, and as we go forward, we will add the subsequent year on so that we're always looking at a 5-year window. Things change during the course of time, so the real intent here is to provide the selectmen, the finance committee, the public with an idea of the types of capital improvements that we need to deal with. I think whether it's in your own personal finance or your private business, you need to look beyond tomorrow, beyond the next year, and that's what this attempts to do by identifying some significant cost items. We identify capital improvements as items that cost $20,000 or more and have an expected useful life of 3 years or more. So some of the items that are projected for the fiscal 2015 budget would be $159,000 for a dump truck for the Public Works Department, $30,000 for an energy management upgrade to the public safety building, and then also we're looking at $320,000 for a self-contained breathing apparatus equipment for the the fire department, which has to be changed out every, I believe it's every 8 or 10 years, so we're due for that. And then also $220,000 for police cruisers. One of the things that I noted early on in my goals was the goal of trying to develop a more energy-efficient fleet. And one of the measures that was taken last year, and I expect to continue this year, is to change what has been the practice of essentially taking the former police cruisers and recycling them, if you will, into uses by other departments. The police cruisers, they certainly, there's a reason why they're cruisers. They have an engine that is much more powerful than the conventional engine. They also don't get particularly good gas mileage. These Crown Vics range from, I think, 12 to 13 miles to a gallon. Beginning this year, rather than cycling the Crown Vics over to, in this case, the water department, we purchased a Ford Fusion, which is the vehicle you see on the right, which gets around 25 miles to a gallon. So we were able to are making an energy savings there, and a pickup truck, which is also, even though not quite as good on the gas mileage, the pickup truck was, again, for the DPW, and we're seeing an increase in fuel efficiency there. In addition, the new police vehicles that we have, which are the SUVs, we're seeing a 20% increase in their fuel efficiency, and this practice will continue. There's a couple of vehicles scheduled for replacement in the fleet for 2015, and my plan would be similarly to replace those vehicles, those Crown Vics, with some type of a sedan that's a more fuel-efficient vehicle. Capital facilities plan, facilities master plan. Within the capital budget, one of the things that I believe is critical for the town to look at is the game plan, so to speak, going forward with respect to our facilities. We have 29 buildings that are either where we have staff or are used for storage. Most of these buildings, with the exception of the library, I think the Shawsheen, most of them were built in the early 60s or late 50s, and some of them, as these two buildings can attest, are much older than that. And the challenge, obviously, is whether it's the Roman House or the Whitfield School, they require a tremendous amount of work to make them really sustainable. And in some cases, there's a question as to whether they can be used for a legitimate town purpose. So, rather than putting money into them at this point without any clear picture as to where we're going to go, my proposal is that we do a facilities study. I'm proposing that the town raise and appropriate $150,000 to review the various buildings that we have, school buildings, town buildings, and assist us in developing a plan that would identify priorities, which buildings should we be focusing on next. Should it be a senior center? Should it be a town school admin building? Whether it makes sense to preserve the Whitfield School. What do we do with the Roman House? I don't really, quite honestly, anticipate that that's a long-term location for the school admin. So I think this is an effort that we should engage in. In addition, this slide really represents the future of the capital improvement plan. One of the reasons that we are looking to go through this process of developing a capital improvement plan is so that we have an ability to structure our borrowing. I'm certainly not looking to do any borrowing immediately. We have with the high school project that debt that we want to pay down, but I think it is appropriate and reasonable to maintain a level of debt, in my estimation, anywhere from 2 to 6% of the operating budget on an annual basis should be committed to borrowing, because it demonstrates to the rating agencies that we're serious about maintaining our facilities, maintaining our infrastructure, and as long as we stay, in a consistent margin there, I think we're okay. Going forward, one of the things that we're going to need to purchase is a fire pumper, which, according to the current estimates, is about $630,000. The wells that we, remaining groundwater wells that we rely upon for water, those periodically need to be upgraded, and there's a cost associated with that, and that'll be part of the capital plan. Also, as the picture in the bottom there represents the Yentile property, is a piece of property that we've invested in. Obviously, we purchased the property. We're now in the process of looking at some conceptual designs in terms of options, and Selectman O'Connell is chairing that effort. In fact, in the budget for this year, we're proposing funds to go to the next level, which is the actual design phase. But beyond that, there will be a need to raise money for construction of a facility. We're estimating at this point it could be in the neighborhood of $2 million. One of the efforts that will be made is certainly to raise money through other means rather than simply going to the taxpayers. But again, that's a capital project that we anticipate down the road. In conclusion, I just want to again reemphasize the effort that has been made to be conservative with the revenue projections. That's been a long-standing hallmark both of my predecessor, and I think it makes sense to take that approach. We've made a real concerted effort to hold the overall increase to less than 3%, while continuing to support certainly the educational needs, prepare for some of the transitions that we're seeing in the departments as we experience a wave of retirements, and also pay attention to our long-term needs and be prepared for those, and then finally to look at ways we can improve the energy efficiency both of our fleet as well as our buildings. One of the projects I don't believe I mentioned, but that's in the budget for 15, is for the first phase of a roof replacement on the North Intermediate. So not only are we doing the windows at the north in an effort to save energy and just to provide a more appropriate environment, but we're also focusing on the roof again to try to address the heat situation and save on the fuel bill. One of the things, a couple of things I'd like to just comment on before I close my remarks. First of all, I would just like to, I know there's a number of members of the school committee in the audience here, and finance committee members I see, and also Joanne Benton, I believe, is out there. I did want to just comment on the relationship that I've had with Joanne in the last, well, it's certainly been longer than a year, but certainly in most recently in my capacity as town manager. Joanne has served, as you know, the town students since 2004. She's been a strong advocate for providing Wilmington children with a top-notch education. The value of her cooperation and collaboration cannot be overstated. While most communities engage in constant battles between the school district and general government for limited dollars Superintendent Benton has been a leader in fostering a cooperative relationship with the town manager. I extend my very best wishes for an active and healthy retirement, and I look forward to the school committee seeking a candidate who is equally committed to the value of working cooperatively for the greater good of the town. So I just want to really compliment Joanne. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to work with Joanne. Also, I would also just want to note another individual who has served the town for many, many years and will be retiring in June, Ed Bradbury, who is the fire chief. Ed is approaching 42 years of service with the town of Wilmington, which is pretty incredible. There aren't that many people that live long enough to get there, let alone serve the town. So, you know, he has been a real a leader in the department. I know he's had some come under fire, so to speak, more recently. But I would like to point to one particular instance that really just demonstrated the commitment and his understanding of the fire service. You may recall back in February of 2013, we had the fire over Avalon Oaks. Blizzard conditions. He obviously responded to the fire as well as his personnel. Was working in a very constrained area of that particular complex. The water pressure wasn't particularly good, but given the just his knowledge of the situation, you know, how to respond, had multiple units from other communities responding as well. Ended up not having any casualties, any significant injuries, and really limited the property damage to that one unit. So that was just one example of the type of individual and his understanding of fire operations. So he's someone that I know I'm certainly going to miss, and I just want to wish him the best in his retirement as well. And then just, if the board will indulge me, I'd just like to read from the report that is before the board, my concluding statements here. The town of Wilmington remains in an enviable position in terms of its financial health and breadth and caliber of service that it provides to the residents and business community. Opening the new high school on time and on budget, managing the wave of retirements, projecting the capital requirements of the community, executing building improvements, and moderating the cost of operating local government at a time of decreasing financial assistance from the Commonwealth is hard work. In the words of Selectman Newhouse, quote, "There are a lot of opportunities disguised as hard work," end quote. I am committed to continuing the hard work and, on behalf of the town, taking advantage of those opportunities to make the most of them. Wilmington is very fortunate to have employees that share my commitment to strive to be more responsive and to deliver a better product. These efforts are demonstrated in the cleanliness of our public buildings, the condition of our streets, the responsiveness of our public safety personnel, the kind and knowledgeable support given to our youth, elders, veterans, and library patrons, and the courteous service provided to our businesses. The budget before you seeks to improve upon our efforts to be a more responsive and responsible provider of municipal services. The goals I reaffirmed are not attainable in a single year and will remain the guideposts for the upcoming fiscal year. An emphasis on education, greater energy efficiency, employing technology to improve services, maintaining a capital improvements plan, implementing measures to better manage exposures to liability, and seeking our operational efficiencies will continue to influence my decisions. The work of reviewing this financial plan begins now. I look forward to meeting with the Finance Committee to discuss the details of this plan and to entertain comments and questions from the Board of Selectmen and the general public. To quote President Andrew Jackson, quote, "Take time to deliberate, but when time for action arrives, stop thinking and go in," end quote. And then before I conclude, I just want to acknowledge the people that have really supported me in this effort. It's really been my privilege to come before the board and offer this plan, but there's a lot of people that work behind the scenes. This document and the supporting documents, the capital plan and the motor vehicle plan, the personnel book, have a lot of hands on them. And I just want to acknowledge those folks who are responsible for that effort. Certainly, in my office, Beverly Dalton, the administrative assistant, she is involved in all aspects of this project, and a lot of proofreading, a lot of time spent reviewing documents. One of the things, as many of you know, she's the one that prepares the annual report and the town calendar, which is so popular. I really want to thank her for her time and commitment. Also, Wendy Martinello and Paula Berry in the office. Wendy, in particular, was responsible for putting together the vehicle book, which is an inventory of all of our vehicles, the entire fleet. She worked with Public Works on that, and the proofreading and all that is kind of an unsung task, but is necessary. Paula, a real utility player, so to speak. Wherever we need a hand, she jumps in. Tremendous attitude and work ethic, and I appreciate her efforts immensely. Mike Morris, in the town accountant, his expertise in terms of municipal finance. He's been in the business for 30 years, I guess, or thereabouts, and he knows debits and credits. And also his right-hand assistant, Lorraine Herman, who, again, was very much involved in the capital, preparing the capital budget. In fact, Mike was, that was one of his primary roles here during the budget process, preparation of that document. And then the other person who is incredibly important to me and just a great asset to the town and to my office is Kendra Amaral, the assistant town manager, HR director. She's the one that, we've had this change here in presentation, and I can tell you honestly that this is her handiwork, and this is just one of the things that she does. She's an incredibly versatile person, and just a real pleasure to work with. So I just want to thank all those folks for their time and effort. Thank you.
What a hand for the staff.
Then finally, just this is the listing of dates before the Finance Committee. We will be starting the process tomorrow with the general government and then the overview and revenue, followed by Planning and Conservation, Building Inspector, Board of Appeals on February 6th. Then on the 11th, we go to Public Buildings and Public Works. On the 13th is Recreation, Library, and Elderly Services. Then on the 18th, Veteran Services and Town Clerk. On the 25th, the Police, Public Safety, Dispatch, and Fire. On the 4th of March is the Wilmington School System, and then Shawshene Tech brings it up on the 6th.
All right, I'd like to, Jeff, you all set?
I'm all set.
Before I'd like to make comment on the town manager's presentation of the budget, I would also like to thank Chief Bradbury for the many years of service here in the town. And I see Joanne Bent in the audience this evening. I think you've done an outstanding job as our superintendent. And it's really nice to see that you were promoted from assistant superintendent to superintendent. I'm a firm believer of promoting within, as Jeff well knows. And I just want to make those couple of quick comments. Pertaining to the budget, I think the town manager has done a great presentation on the budget, something that I can grasp and support, and I'm sure the rest of the board could feel the same way. And I understand the town manager alluded to the fact that the budget is increasing just shy of 2.9%. No one likes to see an increase of taxes. However, if you look at the bigger picture, here in the town, it's unique. We have no kindergarten fee, no trash pickup fee, no sports fee. We have free school transportation for our children. Simply put, we have no user fees here in the town. Other communities pay several thousand, up to $10,000 just on kindergarten alone. So I think we're in a great position here. And the Board of Selectmen has done an outstanding job, I think, working collectively together and with the town manager in the best interest of this community. And this board has done a lot. Yentiles Farm, purchasing the property, Yentiles Farm, purchasing the property from St. Dorothy's Church, all done within the budget under free cash, not raising a single dime as far as your taxes go. So I think the board has done an outstanding job in the best interest of the community. And, and relative to the town manager, I just want to say that I think you've done a great, outstanding job. And I know in the future, in the past, that whoever the next superintendent is going to be, they usually work together, and if there's a need, and I've been on the board a few years with a former town manager, we pumped in hundreds of thousands, even up to $1 million more above and beyond the budget that was requested by the superintendent. And the first person the superintendent seeks when looking to increase budgets or needs is the chief fiscal officer. That needs to be kept in mind as well. Other than that, I think I'm not going to say much more. I would like to turn to my colleagues first before I go to the audience and any of the members, and I'll start with you, Mr. Newhouse. Any comments?
Well, I guess the one observation that I would make, and just to reiterate, is the fact that the budget is increasing about 2.89%, less than 3%. And just to keep that in perspective, while as paying taxes are not, that's not something that any of us like to do. The simple fact is that the cost of running this organization is increasing by more than 3% per year, typically. And one need only look at the health insurance, which is an example of an expenditure that I've used for many years now to try and impress upon people what a challenge it is to maintain an operating budget that's balanced within the limitations of 2.5, Prop 2.5. And given years when local aid, while it may be a shrinking percentage of our budget, it nonetheless is an important source of revenue. And it's even more challenging when you go through times of economic uncertainty, as we have the past several years, when you really couldn't rely on the amount of that local aid going into an annual budget. So I think it speaks not only to the history of what this town has done at town meeting and what the residents have supported, but it speaks to the fine job that the manager is doing now and continues to do in terms of managing the expenditures and I think properly working towards a realistic and achievable revenue number. So with all that said, I know there'll be plenty of time to talk about the specifics of the budget. The one thing that I would perhaps point out, only because the manager did include it in his written budget presentation, but did not speak to it that much in his presentation, is the improvements in technology in our GIS system, et cetera. I think that's a goal that the town has had for several years now, and I think that the things that we're starting to see happen are a credit to his maintaining focus on those goals. So I thought that would be worth mentioning as well. So fine job both in terms of the presentation and the substance, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Selectman Newhouse.
I agree, Jeff. Thank you, and to your staff, to all the hard work just to get to this point. I know there's still a lot of work to do. It's always mentioned conservative spending. I think it's extremely important to note that the conservative budgeting, the fact that local aid always says that their initial budget, they're going to give X amount, never quite works out that way. And so to have an increase here under 3% is, it's because of all your hard work and your staff and all the department heads, which I would like to thank publicly to all the department heads that are here and what they do year-round to work within the parameters of the budget that you're offering. So thank you, and I'm sure there's going to be other good words said on the other end.
Thank you, Judy.
I just wanted to commend you, Jeff, once again. Obviously, my colleagues have said it already, for your hard work and also your whole team at Town Hall. You certainly do work well as a team, and I see it day in and day out as I call in and come into the office. Certainly, it's a very comprehensive budget. Certainly, you have necessary needs throughout the town that you need to fulfill, and certainly the residents are contributing their tax dollars as our commercial base. And quite frankly, there's just been a long evolution of this town in a budget style that speaks to trying to have a healthy community to live in overall, and also a fiscally stable community, and I'm happy to see that that's reflected. I think it certainly cannot be understated that to have a budget come in with a 2.89% increase, typically you associate cost of living to be a minimum of 3% and above. That used to be the standard. Now it's actually probably a little bit more. To be able to be under that number, I think, is quite a remarkable effort. And I don't want to, just elongate my comments by reiterating a lot of the same things, but it really can't be understated what the department heads and all the various aspects of Town Hall and the public safety and all of the various departments, what you do on a day in and day out basis. We see the big picture and kind of see it, put in very pretty packages, but there's a lot of work that translate hours and hours and time away from your families to come in and provide the services. So for many of you, it's not a job, it's a labor of love, and you've made Wilmington your home, even if it's just during your work hours. And to be a resident, to be the beneficiary of that hard work is certainly something that I will for always and forever be grateful. So it's been a great ride, and we're continuing forward, and we look forward to these meetings and ultimately getting to town meeting and hearing from the residents and getting another successful budget passed through. So thank you.
Yeah, a couple of real brief questions, Jeff, if I may. You highlighted some discussions that you've had with some folks in planning for some type of a 4th of July celebration. You were specifically really referring to just this coming 2014. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
Were these discussions weren't for long-term, year after year
For
plan?
2014.
Just this coming year. Okay. I wasn't sure if you made that comment, but I wanted to make sure that was out there. And that's great. I'm glad to see that some momentum is being made there, and hopefully the town will come out and celebrate in whatever fashion we're able to create there. I also noticed, and I don't know if you want to address it now or not, under the capital improvement layout, in 2019, there was a particularly large bullet. Each of the years had 2, 3, 4 million, what they were, and in 2019 it was 9 something, I think. So I don't know if you, did you mention that at all, or I didn't capture what that was referring to?
The item that's slated at this point for 2019 would be a substation, fire substation in North Wilmington, which we estimate to be about $7 million. That's certainly in the works, would be in the works. We don't have any definitive plan on that at this point, but it's an issue that's been talked about, quite honestly, as long as I've been in Wilmington, and I think it's something we need to focus on.
No, I'm glad it's on the radar screen, so that's, thank you for bringing that up. You mentioned the account, or the, you put in $150,000 to look at the buildings. How did you refer to that? What's the line item to review the buildings and the assets, the Roman House, Whitfield, et cetera?
It's a facilities master plan.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. And I'm, again, similarly delighted to see that that's on the radar screen. I think, well, in my circles that I travel with through soccer and some of the other organizations, we are often close to the Whitfield specifically, and the question is often raised to me, what's going on in there? And so it'll be nice to start to at least take steps towards being able to provide an answer. So I'm looking forward to that. That's my questions. I will simply say that I'll reiterate or repeat what some of my colleagues have said. I admire it's like running a business where there's, at least in a business, you have a product you can sell and you can raise more revenues, and we don't have that here. So what you, with the assistance of Kendra, so my compliments go to really all at Town Hall, but especially you two who have reviewed the finite set of funds. There isn't any more. And you've been able to sock money away for the future, invest in capital improvements, and plan for coming generations that may not be us, take care of the needs that we have today, provide the services that Mr. McCoy talked about that we're able to provide to our residents today. provide great plowing and sanding and salting, and if you drive from one community into ours, you immediately recognize that you're in a better community as soon as you drive in. Doing all of that in a context of not being able to plan for or not being able to go out and get more revenue if you need it. You know, we always hope that local aid or that the state will come through with unrestricted government aid, but right now we don't. That's a complete unknown. So don't plan for it. Don't budget with the idea that you're going to have some type of increase. And if we get an increase, then that's gravy on the cake. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now. Compliments to everyone that was involved in this. I know there's a lot more work to be done, and looking forward to it coming back. But thank you very much for a great presentation, and again, for a lot of good management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shambu. I see members of the school committee and the FinCom in the audience. Before I go to them, I just want to make one more quick comment. The Board of Selectmen has worked collectively with the school committee relative to the new construction of the high school, and I believe that is priority one in this community. And people like myself and Judy, we ran 3 years ago. We put our elections on the line. We supported the construction of that high school, and we prevailed. And I just want to make that point, that we work together, and we need to work together. And it would have been nice to see that open in September 2014. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But as the town manager said, even though he said it's going to be within the budget, there's like 1.2 million of that budget that went to other things that shouldn't have happened. And we would have probably went not only on time, but under budget, but we're within the budget. So that needed to be stated. And I see members of the school committee. I'll go to them first, and then members of the FinCom. Anybody in the school committee would like to make a comment? All set?
I would just say,
Yes.
I'm full of things here. As you stated before, I feel that in speaking for the school committee, I could say to you that we are desolate that we're going to be losing Joanne Benton. She has been such a visionary. There'll be opportunities later on to assess her achievements, but as she has worked with you, so she has worked with us. She taught us how to be a member of the school committee. She has taught us how to get our schools running in such a good way that people are proud to be part of the Wilmington community. And she taught us how to work with the town, because you're absolutely right. Before she came in, there wasn't always that good working relationship with the town, and now there absolutely is. And that's a high priority for us for this coming superintendent search. But we
Glad to
want
hear
to,
that.
and we also want to thank you. Loved the presentation. Loved this, being able to look at the charts and everything. I want to thank you for all the hard work that you give us. That people know that you do your job, we do our job, and things will come out really well. So we thank you very much for what
Thank
you
you,
do for
Chairman
us.
Kane. I see members of the FinCom. Anybody would like to make a comment? I also see department heads. I'll go to the FinCom first.
Yeah, Dick Hayden, Finance Committee. I just want to compliment the work that was done in putting this together. This is probably one of the clearest and finest budget presentations that I've attended. So kudos.
Thank you. I see department heads. Anybody would like to make a comment? I see Superintendent Benton. Go ahead.
My last comments. I just wanted to acknowledge the support of the Board of Selectmen, the former town manager and the present town manager in the work that I've done over the past 10 years with all of you. I always talk about Wilmington as the best kept secret, and I mean that sincerely. My colleagues always are in awe when I talk about the budget process and how it goes so smoothly in Wilmington. And for that, I thank Jeff and his team. I thank the previous town manager and his team. I thank the previous Board of Selectmen and the present Board of Selectmen, as well as the school committee. This town works so well because of the cooperation and the collaboration that you do not see in other communities. It's very, very special, and you should be very, very proud of it. I've worked in 4 school districts, but I will tell you, and I've always said, this is my favorite because of the special bond between the town and the schools. So I wish you well in the future. I thank you, Jeff, for the work you've done on this budget, and look forward to town meeting when we get the budget passed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before I end this part of this segment, a couple of things. first time being chairman, thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. I was able to, at least from Mr. Smaglia, finish a mint, so probably the one and first and only time. And the other thing, Jeff, you talk about $150,000 of a commission to take a look at the old buildings. I'll give you some free advice. The Whitfield School and the Roman House, tear it down. Just because it's old, it doesn't mean it's historic. And nobody wants to see, and I'll tell you, I know I'm probably saying something I shouldn't say, but nobody wants to see that Roman house in that front of that beautiful high school. And, so I see here Lou laughing a little bit, but,
You think you put your election on the line for the high school, you just put it on the line.
Let me tell you, I've done a lot worse than that, believe me. But, all right, once again, I'd like to thank everybody being here this evening, and this part of the segment is over, and have a nice, pleasant night. Thank you. Moving right along, we have communications. I'll just turn to the town manager right now at the moment.
With respect to communications, really, we just have the important dates. February 7th, the last day to submit warrant articles for inclusion on the warrant for the annual town meeting that's coming up in May. And then the next Selectmen's meeting is the February 10th, which is next Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any public comments? I see no public comments, and I'll turn to this side of the, any new business and committee reports. I'll start with Selectman Shampoo.
Nothing more to add, thank you.
I just wanted to add an important date for the Yentile Development Committee. We have a public workshop, which will be this Wednesday, so this week, February 5th. It will be at Wilmington High School in the cafeteria, and it will be 7 to 8:30. So we'll actually have Waterfield Design Group will be there, and we're actually going to be doing an actual hands-on exercise. So we're really getting the word out. It's been out in all the media outlets, and we're trying to get it out on all the social media sites and getting it out to all the organizations. And we certainly would appreciate people making it a priority to attend. We are expecting some weather, but at this point, we're still proceeding as planned. And snow or shine, and there will be other future workshops that will be included. They won't be a reiteration of this first workshop. There'll be more of a continuation and an update. So I'm really hoping that people will find the time in their calendar to attend. So thank you.
May I ask, Judy, if schools get canceled for Wednesday because of the snow, will that impact the plan for your meeting?
I will defer to the town manager on this question, Jeff, just because I called in today to discuss it, and I know that there had been some discussions about it today, and there'll be some tomorrow. So what would be a reasonable response?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. I think it depends upon the amount of snow. Obviously, if it's a significant storm, we don't want people out driving if the road conditions are such. So I think we're just going to have to play it by ear.
And with schools, we see notices on TV and stuff. How will folks who would want to participate in this meeting know whether or not they should make the trip down? Is it a website thing, or how will they know if it has, what's the notification process?
I would say that if it looks like we're going to have to cancel the event, we would look to use the phone system to alert people. So if in the absence of an alert to that effect, then people should expect that the meeting is on.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
All set. All right, I just, before I take a motion to adjourn, I noticed the police chief in the audience. I want to thank the police chief for being here. Thank you, chief. Is a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Selectman Newhouse, second by Selectman Somagli. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you and have a nice night.